that I'm on. It is also January, January, June 17th, 2025. We're getting very close to Richard's birthday. Oh, jeez. He should be celebrating his birthday. Okay, let me make sure that I'm on. Doesn't want to go. Let's see. Just so I can see. There you go. Just so I can see everybody's comments. And I know it's late. I know it's really late here. It's we're burning the midnight oil, but this is really important. There's so many things going on, and we're in communication with so much information, intelligence that I really never ever really wanted to know. Um, you know, I didn't want to always focus on all the workings behind the scene. I didn't even realize there was so much workings behind the scene, that there was indeed a deep state, and that deep state is absolutely in conflict with the constitutional legitimate government. So you have this illegitimate that wants to legitimize themselves in conflict with what we have voted for, right? Um, our entire country, and the institutions, and this is why uh, you see so many unanswered questions everywhere. And one of those unanswered questions, of course, is where are Richard's remains? Richard, 1,779 days ago, was forcibly removed from his barracks room, and his life was taken from him in the line of duty on Fort Bliss. That the in the line of duty has been confirmed by the Department of Defense, that when he was found, that's in the paperwork. That's not my words. When he was found to have been killed in the line of duty. And so this corroborates what we've been saying all along. And of course, Richard was a whistleblower, and this is why he was such a threat. He was such a threat to the deep state, the those that are impersonating or even wrongly, well, they're impersonating, or they are even in government positions, serving foreign and domestic uh, entities, which makes them traitors. So they're either impersonators, being traitors, or they are just plain out traitors. And so, and this is the conflict going back and forth to control the narrative. That's why controlling the narrative is so important, because it's just acts of deception, and we know that because we have multiple witnesses, that Richard, that was so overwhelming. All of that evidence was so overwhelming from Jaime Corona, the Department of Homeland Security, that was the attaché for the Department of State, that corroborated that Richard was no longer alive. And of course, Nidal Baem, who's the Palestinian arms dealer that was impersonating an FBI agent to get uh, to be able to have authority to demand that flyers of Richard be taken down, because the FBI, which he absolutely has connections to, um, familiar connections to the law enforcement. Being a Palestinian arms dealer, you're very connected to law enforcement, especially when you're trying to sell like $3 million worth of ammunition to the El Paso Police Department. But, you know, to take down Richard's he was interfering with Richard's investigation. But he also confessed that Richard was dead, that Richard had been found, that the FBI were looking for Richard in in Juarez, Mexico, and that this was a secret mission. That this was a secret mission that he was revealing, and so this, and then of course DES, that's the department, I mean the director of emergency services for Fort Bliss, corroborated also that Richard was no longer alive. Um, and he was quote unquote good food for the coyotes, a good meal for the coyotes. Um, and then of course the Department of State corroborated that the FBI were looking for Richard and Juarez. And so, you ask, okay, what's going on with the El Paso FBI field office, right? What's going on with them? That they have an impersonator, they have confirmation of FBI looking for Richard's remains in Juarez, and what is going on? You have Nieto confirmation that Nieto leaked the whistleblower Judge Roger Rodriguez's report, who identified the prime suspects in the murder and the taking of the life investigation of Richard Halliday, and that was leaked. His name was leaked, which, when you dox a whistleblower, you're putting their life on the line, you're putting their life at risk. And this was FBI agent Nieto. And we know all the connections, right? We know all the connections that this law enforcement has with familia connections, family connections, with even Bob Moore of El Paso Matters, whose parent company is El Paso Community Foundation. Okay, so that's the Hunt Corporation. So if you want to know a billionaire, there's a billionaire close, and that's being reported. Um, people are asking, who are the billionaires behind this, right? And, of course, Bob Moore is married to Kathleen Gannon of KTEP, which is NPR and public PBS, right? And, of course, they're connected to Angela Kachurga, and they're connected, Bob Moore and Kathleen Gannon, connected to Chavira's from RNA, Chavira Auto Group LLC, which are absolutely, connected to Richard's, targeting Richard as a whistleblower. They said, okay, we've got to go after this young soldier who is fearless, who is brave, who is willing to be a whistleblower, is absolutely rather burn his money than spend it on whores and blow. We can't have that now. We can't have a soldier of character, a distinguished honor graduate. He's a risk to our criminal enterprise, our criminal trafficking enterprise, worth billions of dollars. So they couldn't have a soldier of character that wanted a legitimate um, law enforcement accountability to this cartel tied, because we know that Bob Moore is tied to Willie Moya and Arturo Alba. And Arturo Alba, clearly everyone in El Paso knows who he was, with connections with Univision, being the anchor man, very popular. Both Willie Moya and Arturo Alba were where they lost their lives with gunshots. They were absolutely tied to the Mexican cartel, and they are tied to Luis Rene Diaz, the manager of the prosecutor's office there in El Paso under Bill Hicks, the usurper. This is that deep state We are naming the deep state, y'all. That's what we're doing. Every day we're naming the deep state. You want to know who the deep state is? Come here, we're naming them. And why is this important? Because there is, absolutely confrontations going on with the legitimate government of the United States. Those that want to do accountability, and you're talking about $1 billion enterprise with billionaires that have compromised individuals or have placed their individuals. Like, why is it that people that with ties to the Mexican cartel, ties to El Paso, ties to New Mexico, ties to Fort Bliss, ties to um, Juarez, the whole surrounding area, are then assigned to become FBI agents and are assigned to the FBI field office in El Paso, um, assigned to Fort Bliss and as senior NCOs or officers. Why is it that these individuals that are from the area, clearly compromised, clearly groomed to hold these positions, are then appointed to these positions through, human resources? And why is this important? Because Richard was surrounded by those that absolutely were protecting the criminal enterprise of the criminal trafficking of the borderland. And and he was a whistleblower. And President Trump won in 2016, November of 2016, and when 2017 came around, he was a little slower than what he was this time. The second time he's moving with lightning speed, right? But at that time, he was green behind the ears when it came to being a president of the United States. And but he absolutely, being a businessman, knew where he was going. He wanted to, and he's always said this, because he's an economist. He's an economist. He's a trained economist, the Wharton School of Business. He absolutely knows all about business and economy, getting it going, making America strong again with a legitimate economy, with a legitimate economy, not the um, the deep state criminal trafficking of things that hurt people, things that ruin families, things that ruin children, things that ruin the psychology. We just recently had a meeting with our bishop from our church. And, one of the things that was really clear is that the men are coming back. The men are just flowing back into the church, into the historical um, church. They're just coming. But their women are really suffering. They are really suffering psychologically. And that's where, we, uh, while we were wanting to make, um, points and, um, let's say, put money towards helping these women, helping these young women. Um, that is his aim. One of his aims is to help these young women and children, um, uh, strengthen their mind, strengthen their spirit, um, and of course, it has to do with identity. When you don't know your identity, that's why baptism is so important, because then you know yourself, you know your identity, you know who you belong to, you know what your mission is. You have marching orders. Baptism is so important, You're saved by water and blood, and you know exactly that with your baptism. Um, so it is, but it just shows you that this underlining deep state, I don't know what else to call it, the tunnel people, or behind the scenes, the Oz, the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain, the man behind the curtain. I don't know. I think deep state is a good term. Maybe someone else can help me out and give another term. But and they're very, very good at psychology, right? They're very good at messaging. And they're losing their luster. It's starting to fade. They were very good. Let's just say that they were very good at directing the narratives. When it came to Richard, it was totally insane by then. And we were like, what are you talking about? I mean, it's just so insane that we know it's a lie, right? Um, and so, who is behind all of this? And of course, who's the real target? And we've been saying that, of course, this deep state is um, willing to go after people's lives, right? They're willing to go after people's lives and take life. They're absolutely willing to take life, and you saw that. You see that in Richard's case, and then to put resources to cover up, and then to put resources to cover up the cover up. Okay, to cover up those that that interfered with the investigation, to cover up the cover up. Um, and they put resources to do that, and that's why um, you know, it, it's very, very difficult to get the accountability. So, like it should be very quickly, right? It should be very quick because it's so obvious. But you have the interference in the investigations, the tampering of the cases, the witness intimidations, just all kinds of nonsense in the investigations. And the most absurd the most absurd things going on. And then you have the cover up of the cover up, the cover up of the interference. And then and then you have these really, really big problems of an upset election, where you get someone like Donald Trump, um, who is absolutely a businessman, absolutely an economist, that absolutely wants a prospering real economy, not a lot of empty buildings that are held together by billion dollar criminal enterprise. Okay. He wants, you got and you see that, and I saw that in El Paso, and you saw that during the whole COVID thing, that you know w- they were willing to absolutely keep their criminal enterprise going, their economy, their billion-dollar economy on criminal trafficking when it comes to whatever kind of military weapon or ammunition or substances or even human trafficking. All of that was still going, right? That was all. That wasn't unharmed. Matter of fact, they lifted it up. And this is the problem with the young women. They were going over to only, that one site, the one site that starts with only, and put into that kind of business, that was really going up. But then the legitimate economy, legitimate small businesses were all moved trillions of dollars to the elitist groups, the billionaires, right? The billionaires that became more billionaires. Um, And so Trump was absolutely and is absolutely still a threat to this criminal economy, this billion-dollar criminal trafficking economy that includes, you know, um, any which way a contract can go as long as it's an open checkbook contract, meaning taxpayer funded. You know, we are $37 trillion dollars in debt because of these open checkbook, taxpayer funded, overfunded, over budget. And, this is a beautiful thing that President Trump taught us to look at. Is it over budget? What is the budget? And is it over budget? And I can tell you right now, coming from Germany, the American hospital that's beautiful in Landstuhl, it's fine. It's been there a long time, but you know how they build buildings in Europe? They last forever. This building is totally fine. And every building needs maintenance. So, no excuse, oh, it needs maintenance. No, every building needs maintenance. This is a perfectly good U.S. Army or tri-service, right? Um, Hospital or medical center, the Launchdool Medical Center. Um, and, but no, they got a contract for $1 billion contract to build a new military for only Americans in Germany. And I'm like, $1 billion? That's not like 100 million. That's not like 500 million. That's not 700 million. That's not, I mean, $1 billion for, no, it just did not make sense. And I'm sure it's over budget now. So, this is, uh, something that Americans only can control by the vote and trusting on the candidates that they vote for that they'll do the right thing. And we haven't had very good luck with that, right? We haven't had very good luck with that until President Trump. Until President Trump came and absolutely attempted in this very deep state, rigged, very rigged um, government situation that we're in uh, to attempt to um, address all of this corruption. And and that, absolutely the front door of the United States is El Paso. And right there, we know that um, the FBI field office there absolutely has individuals that are compromised, totally compromised. So compromised that I think everybody else is made impotent that works in that office. They, it's when you're compromised by the cartel, the Mexican cartel, and the cartel is just going crazy over in Juarez for very little money, that they will take someone's life, right? And you have them hanging bodies up, one of them naked, just this past weekend, just for display to scare people, to intimidate, to show that they don't have to fear accountability, that they can do that kind of stuff with impunity. That's, uh, puts a lot of people that are in the field office that would like to do something right, puts them in a really tough situation, doesn't it? And it makes them impotent. They're just impotent then. And the same thing with the shaky uh, uh, military soldiers on Fort Bliss. They were absolutely intimidated in fear. They were shaking. We saw them. I saw them. I even recorded the one from the house. You could hear it in his voice. He was a mess. Psychologically, he was a total mess. And it's just, I can't even imagine what the women go through. They were totally a mess. Um, and so, this, w- w- who's, that's why this is so important. Who's behind targeting President Trump now. We know that he was targeted. We know that they attempted to take his life. Where did that come from? And I said that right after both attempts, and I'm sure there's been a third attempt. Um, but the two attempts that we really researched, they led to El Paso. They led to El Paso, and I said that out loud. And why? Why would um, El Paso be? Um, what's the evidence, right? What's the evidence? And why would they want to hurt or want to remove President Trump, right? Well, and this goes really, I'm going to get to the point, uh, how this relates to what's going on right now with Israel and Iran. Um, but we have to really understand who has so much to lose. Uh, you know, El Paso is absolutely the epicenter to the criminal trafficking. Absolutely, because it has Fort Bliss. Because it has Fort Bliss. More so than Fort Hood, right? More so than Camp Pendleton. Um, because of course California is a very big part connected to Fort Bliss. So more so than even Hawaii because you're you're right here on the mainland, right? And Hawaii is also connected to Fort Bliss in this network. So and it goes into the states, up into Tennessee and Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, South Carolina. They're everywhere. They're everywhere. And the trafficking routes go through everywhere. It's a billion-dollar industry. It's a deep state economy. It's a deep state, very, very criminal economy. And they're taking advantage of the country itself, the institutions itself, and the taxpayers, um, and the debt that we have. Right? We just put it on our tab. We'll pay it. Our children will pay it later. They put it on the tab when um, they split the check a little bit. You know, make them pay for it now, make them pay for it later. And, it's just absolutely evil. It's just really absolutely evil. And you see that they had El Paso involved. Veronica Escobar, very involved. She was very involved with the Beto O'Rourke campaign, um, which, we can do a whole session on the Beto O'Rourke campaign and the whole Walmart, the connection with the Walmart orchestration and cover up and the cover up of the cover up, right? Um, and the connection with Bob Moore and the media, and the greater media area. But Veronica Escobar was absolutely with Beto O'Rourke, and she was the co-chair for the Biden administration, for the Biden campaign, right? Holding the purse strings for the Biden campaign. And when the disaster happened, the um, um, the debate between President Biden and President Trump, it was a total disaster, right? For Biden. And Biden was then removed. And without ever a vote, without one vote, without any kind of democratic process, they put Kamala Harris in, right? Kamala Harris. And this is what's very interesting. Veronica Escobar stayed as co chair. Okay. That is very unlikely in normal circumstances, but she did it. She was somebody else to me, in my opinion, and everybody else's opinion, I think, that's paying attention. Um, was running the show behind this deep state that, Biden and Kamala were the same answer to the same deep state individual. And that's why Veronica Escobar um, was again the purse holder, the co chair for Kamala Harris. And that was like $1.2 billion. $1.2 billion for an election. So, they were all in to win. They were all in 2016. They had a lot to lose. And that's why, and then you see it in 2020, they had a lot to lose. And they really damaged, the whole healthcare industry, the whole, well, really, they meant it for evil, but God meant it for good because those of us that are, have very close connections with healthcare, we were made aware of things we weren't made aware of before. And it really woke us up without being the wokeness, but truly awake and the deceptions, the deceptive practices in our healthcare and our science. The deceptive practices that they call science, and they're really deceptive. They're like, I guess, what a witch or a warlock would do, right? They're very deceptive, and I really mean that from a spiritual point of view. Um, so we were really made aware of that, and so many people. I mean, here in South Carolina, so many people have been made aware of that, and that's just uh, for the good. And so they meant it to shut people down, right? To keep people in their house, to keep people from talking together, to keep people from going to church, to keep people from their business meetings, to keep people from going even to work. I mean, just now, because of President Trump, people are going back to work. So they really interfered in the election by keeping people from talking about their thoughts and debating it out in the public forums, right? In the everyday household. I mean, they even forbid people from going and visiting their grandparents or going into the hospital and being with their loved ones that were very, very ill. Um, it was just, and you learn a lot. You learn a lot during that time when people are very, very ill. There's an honesty that comes out during that time. And so, just to keep people from being human was just really wicked. And election interference, absolutely, to stop people from thinking and speaking and with one another is election interference. And so they did so many crazy, insane things during that time, including grand theft larceny, right? From just shifting trillions of dollars from the middle class to the upper class. It was, really grand theft larceny, and by deceptive practices. So, who is behind this? Who are the billionaires? Who are the upper class that is behind this? When you have absolutely the center of the Biden campaign and the Kamala Harris campaign, you're talking about the purse strings of a campaign being um, right there in El Paso, being right there, from El Paso, Veronica Escobar, who, of course, doesn't answer to herself. She's absolutely answers to, you know, the a powerful figure, and so they absolutely had the motive and the reason to get rid of President Trump. They did it. They tried in 2016. They failed. They tried in 2020, and you can tell that that whole election was interfered with. And then they tried so hard with this whole 2024 campaign, right? The whole 2024 election, they tried so hard. But because they had exposed themselves so much in 2020 and 2021, and they had, you know, brought in so many migrants that were compromised by them because now they were illegal, right? They were illegal. They weren't even brought here legally. And now they're compromised. Now they're criminals. And then they could be compromised even more. And some of them were even uh, really, really bad criminals, uh, compounded criminals. And the American people saw it all, and so even with $1 billion, uh, $200 million, they couldn't win the election. They could bring in Oprah, they could bring in the twerkers, they could do whatever, and they couldn't do it. They couldn't beat President Trump, who they had targeted, not only his businesses, not only his family, not only his character, but then legally they weaponized the justice system. They weaponized justices, and they went after him, uh, to hold him accountable because no one's above the law. And yet, over and over and over again, they weren't holding real criminals accountable. And El Paso knew that, because they were witnessing 10,000 children at a time, hundreds of thousands of children being trafficked through Fort Bliss. Fort Bliss on the taxpayer dime, paying for these contracts. This is why General Kelly is, I just feel like he's so evil because he was a big part of that. Big part of that. Sorry, he is a big part of that. And he was Southcom, and um, it's just heartbreaking. You just cry, and that he targets. Um, he targeted President Trump, didn't he, to to attack his character. And so it seems like everyone, and not everyone, but a big majority of those that targeted President Trump came out of interests out of El Paso, out of the criminal trafficking. And when you search it even some more, putting names together, you see it very, very clearly that a huge majority were coming because of interests. And really, this is just with our very limited intelligence, and it's very clear. So those that have a privileged to access secret intelligence to, or even systems that they could do a more thorough search on where are these attacks coming from. Because you see in Richard's case, they absolutely targeted him for being a whistleblower. They targeted him in a way where they befriended him to get information, to develop a plan to harm him, to retaliate against him, and which ended up in his forcible removal from the barracks and his life being ended. And then the cover up, and then the cover up of the cover up. So you see that clearly there. And of course, they targeted President Trump over and over, and they attempted to end his life too. And when you look at the whole thing, the motive, they're so connected to this epicenter of criminal trafficking that's worth billions and billions. And it's being played out right now, too, in Juarez, because kidnappings are way up. Crime is way up because, you know, they're so used to um, this criminal trafficking, and so many spigots have been turned off. And it's a failed state over there. So they're not able to handle um, the results of accountability, or getting rid of some of the means of the corruption. And so the crime is like, a temper tantrum of a kid when you take away their candy, right? So it's really, the reports coming out of there are really heartbreaking because of the temper tantrums, um, from the criminals. Because we all know who El Mayo is, which El Chapo is. We know, what was going on over there. Uh, you come over the border and it gets more elusive, right? It gets a little foggier. And, so Richard's case exposed, lifted the fog, and exposed the generals, and exposed the NCOs, exposed um, the dirty agents in the FBI, exposed the dirty Texas Rangers, some of those. And I'm not saying the institution, I'm saying those that were dirty in this, like Gustavo Sanchez, right? And so it exposed these names, and they it is going to be a temper tantrum, and part of that temper tantrum was targeting President Trump. So it is absolutely, and we're getting more and more confirmation and more hard evidence that you know, the attempts on President Trump's life is very, very connected to El Paso, to El Paso. Okay. And we're getting confirmation, corroborating confirmation of that. Just to let you know how important Richard's case is, and the Walmart mass shooting case, that is, they're intertwined together, that exposes this deep state, um, and how they were operating, really extorting the American people, and creating this um, criminal enterprise that was taking over. Well, taking positions in our government, And so that leads to why now Israel and Iran. Iran, it's been happening forever. I'm old enough to know they've, been talking about Iran forever. And I know nuclear power is very, very good to have. Nuclear power is very good to have, and they don't want Iran to have that. Iran provides oil to China, to Russia. Um, you know, Iran is Persia. Okay, Iran. People have to understand Persia. You go look up Persia. It is an amazing country, and I'm sure that there is some evil intentions there, like with any country. But I am not of this, like, let's go to war with Iran. Nope, nope, It's been going on for so long. I'm not in that camp at all. I'm not in Lindsey Graham's camp at all. If Lindsey Graham wants to fight them, then he needs to put on his boots and his flak vest, and he needs to go and do it himself, because the Iraq, the Desert Shield, the Desert Storm, Albania. I can go on with Saudi Arabia and Iraq, and where my husband was, where my father went, served in that, and multiple deployments, um, Qatar. Richard was in Qatar, multiple, and I can go on and on with all of the different stories that we have that really were a false narrative that took our soldiers there, that, soldier, and I should say service members that lost their limbs, got burnt, lost their lives, destroyed. Uh, Children's lives that wanted to know who their father and mother is, destroyed marriages. I can't tell you how many marriages have been destroyed because of deployments, how many crimes because of the stress, because of deployment after deployment after deployment, how much stress that caused in people's lives, and how many children's lives were affected and destroyed because their parents, and not even destroyed, but just affected negatively because of the stress that the parents were undergoing, and how that put a stress on grandparents and family members. And I was very uh, part of that. I was very, very part of that. Um, the constant lies, the constant lies, um, and then on top of that, um, the lack of esprit de corps that really grew. The wokeness that was coming into our military. Um, so here you were expected to be a warrior, but you couldn't be a warrior. Uh, that wasn't woke. You couldn't be a warrior. Um, you couldn't be patriotic. And so there were so many problems with all of that, and President Trump has to deal with that right now. He has to deal with that. And of course, now we have drones and we have the AI operated drones. Um, yes, very powerful weapons and things, but we have also a lot of grand theft larceny that has been happening in our military. I mean, just think of from the highest level with Mealy leaving our equipment behind. Do you think that Mealy would leave billions of dollars of equipment behind unless he had made some deals, right? Unless he had made some deals. And that all needs to be investigated because I don't see any problem with having to pack up our night vision goggles. I don't see any problem on any plane to have enough room for night vision goggles. And yet they were left there in Afghanistan. And with helicopters, and I've been in these planes. Absolutely, there's plenty of room to put loads and loads of equipment and arms and technology on the planes. And we have given our generals everything. They have everything. They have the biggest budgets. They have all kinds of JAG. They have all kinds of other help to organize all kinds of staff. There is no excuse that we left all of that equipment in Afghanistan. And I think it was grand theft larceny. I would like to know who went and bought new houses and new cars and everything like that. It was grand. I really, and of course, having almost 5 years with this and all of the grand theft larceny from out of Fort Bliss, it is clear that we have a lot of thieves. So that needs to be addressed because that is a national security threat to weaken our military. And so that's why I thought the parade was so important because people need to see our equipment. We need to have it often because we need to see what we pay for. We need to see our military equipment. We need to hold them. It's like an audit. Those parades are like an audit on our military. We need to see our troops. We need to see our service members. We need to see our planes. We need to see how they're trained. We need to see them in action, because otherwise, behind the scenes, we have grand theft larceny of our military, and we give them just about, well, we do $1 trillion. So those parades need to continue, because they are an audit of our military. And so I'm very grateful for President Trump with that one, because look at the situation we're in right now. We're in a situation where the media, of course, with the deep state, has formed a narrative that we need to go to war with Iran, right? That's their narrative. And so I'm glad we had the audit. I'm glad, because you have to prepare for those parades. You have to practice. You have to train. You have to have esprit de corps and be the best that you can be. So it's I hope that President Trump, the master of deal making, right? The master of the deal, the art of the deal, can figure out a way where we're not sending any of our sons and daughters to fight any kind of war in Iran, or in the Middle East. We have had our belly full of it. We've shed so much blood, so much unnecessary blood. And not only that, we've had so much grand theft larceny. And we also have destroyed um, historical buildings, historical property, right? War is an excuse to destroy historical property. Um, that's just absolutely grand theft larceny too. So, and I think that this is a diversion, and a targeting of President Trump. They're targeting President Trump with this warmongering, right? Um, and of course, you know, the secular, um, and I love Israel, right? I love Israel. I love the history of Israel. I don't want Israel to be bombed. We don't want Israel to be bombed. I'm not as scared of radioactive uranium. I'm not afraid of that, because, you know, look at Fukushima, look at Chernobyl, look at Nagasaki, and the bombs. Of course, they're all bombs, but people are living in Nagasaki and Fukushima now. They're living in Chernobyl. The birds and the butterflies are going from flower to flower, and and we're told that there's going to be 1,000 years of winter or whatever. It's always this fear mongering, fear mongering, and if it was that dangerous, they wouldn't build like a Fukushima plant to boil water, because that's what uranium does. It boils water. It's this energy that boils water, gives you lots of energy to your country, to your community, to your area. We had it right there where we were living in Germany, and they wouldn't put it right there in the middle of the population if it was that much of a threat. Maybe maybe they would, I don't know, but I don't think so. And it's all over France, and they shut them down, right? All over France, um, this for the power grid, and very safe, cheap, effective energy. And so, do they not want Iran to have this nuclear power? And these the bombs are just, sorry, I don't believe it, what they tell us. It just does not add up to me at all, and maybe I'm wrong, and someone can educate me on it. But from what I know, there's so much fear mongering, and that is a fact. They absolutely fearmonger to the nth degree to, get you to be a deer in the headlights so that you don't do anything, that they bully you like these good agents in the FBI, that you're just impotent and you just can't do anything because you have these bullies, this cartel um, uh, atmosphere around you, or threats, these cartel threats around you. And, when you've lost your son, like we've lost our son, it's like, what are you going to do? You're taking away life, you're taking away life. And, um, we just can't tolerate that. We can't tolerate that they can just do it with impunity and destroy our country on top of it, destroy our military, do grand theft larceny, destroy our economy, destroy the future, destroy historical buildings and landmarks and everything like that, that they don't want you to see because they don't want, maybe you get some ideas, maybe you'd get some patent ideas, maybe you'll get some, questions. Um, that you will try to invent something or whatever. You know, they just really are um, control freaks, and they want to control us more than ever so that they can continue with their criminal enterprise. That's my opinion through all of this, and it is backed by hard evidence, mountains of hard evidence. And you know, and you can see our sons and daughters, the direction that they're going, and you just have to ask yourself, what direction do you want them to go into? And how do you want their faith to be, and how do you want um, uh, their their psychology, their psyche to be, their spirit, and we need to absolutely protect our children's spirit more than anything, more than anything. And Richard's spirit haunts these evil people every day, because he has such a beautiful spirit that lives forever and ever. So um, the main message is there's a motive and there's a will to target President Trump out of out coming out of El Paso. Okay, there is a motive and there's a will, and so keep your eyes on El Paso and the diversion of, they always pick really good diversions, right? Of Israel and Iran. Um, don't forget to keep your eyes on El Paso, on Richard's case, on the Walmart mass shooting case, because that's not resolved, and those that targeted President Trump. And remember this, he knows, he's got the intelligence. He absolutely knows. And you see the new tweets or messages that he sent out, the messaging of the parade, the messaging of uh, the deportations of the criminals, be it an immigration violation or anything else. If you're not here legally or anything else, um, he is absolutely behind the mass deportations. And so that is really, really important, because he knows that the trafficking and the illegal immigration through the NGOs and all of the funding of the NGOs and the contracts and everything like that, the epicenter is El Paso. So, and he knows who tried to hurt him forever and ever. He knows. So, it's going to be very interesting to see how he handles this conflict, this inner mutinous, it's mutiny, mutinous conflict against his administration, his leadership, him being commander in chief, chief law enforcer, chief magistrate. I mean, that's what the president of the United States is. So he's juggling a lot, and just to let you know our thoughts, and he absolutely knows who Richard Halliday is. Absolutely knows. So thank you so much. God bless you, and please keep sharing.